After years of hard work, I graduated alone. When I walked into my parents' home days later, my sister smirked, "Your degree means nothing." 37 missed calls. One text message said, "You owe us an apology." That was how my graduation day concluded. My name is Patrick. I'm 22, and last June was meant to be the most proud day of my life. I had pushed my way through college without much assistance, balancing late-night shifts at a diner, tutoring positions, and a few freelance assignments to keep the lights on in my apartment. My journey came to an end with graduation. The moment I could finally show to myself, and maybe even to my family, that I had accomplished something worth celebrating. But when I stepped across the platform, there was not a single recognized face in the audience. Not my mother, father, or even my grandmother, who had never missed a church service in her life. The rows of vacant chairs in the family section may have easily been spotlights illuminating my loneliness. You see, I have a younger sister named Julia. She's 20, just 2 years younger than me, and she's always been the golden kid. The family's argument has always been that she is sensitive and requires extra care, which in reality meant she got whatever she wanted. At 16, I had new clothes, name-brand shoes, and a car that I wasn't permitted to touch. Even when my bike chain broke and I had to walk 3 miles to school. When she discovered she was pregnant at 19, my parents turned the situation into a fairy tale. She was no longer a scared teenager making rash decisions. She was a glowing young woman who brought the family together. They threw her a lavish baby shower that might have served as a wedding reception. Guess what date they chose? The same day that I graduated. At first I assumed it was simply terrible luck. Perhaps the venue they desired was only available that weekend. Perhaps they didn't understand the dates overlapped. I granted them the benefit of the doubt. I even called my mother a month before graduation to remind her about the conflict. She answered, "Oh honey, we'll figure something out. Maybe we'll split the day." But as the weeks went by, the truth grew more difficult to deny. Julia's baby shower invitations went out, and none of them mentioned my graduation. When I brought it up again, my father said firmly, "Patrick, you'll have plenty of ceremonies in your life, but your sister, this is once in a lifetime." I remember sitting in quiet, squeezing my phone so tightly that I felt it would crack, because how could they say that? As if my accomplishment had no value. It was as if I hadn't worked so hard for 4 years to get to that point. On the morning of graduation, I still had optimism. I kept checking my phone, expecting to hear that they were on their way. Nothing. I gazed around the university parking lot as students and family arrived, bearing bouquets and balloons. Still nothing. By the time my name was called, I had accepted what I knew. They were not arriving. The cheers that erupted for other grads were muffled to my ears. I walked across the stage alone, forced to smile at the dean, and got the diploma that had cost me so many restless nights. My phone buzzed just as I stepped down the steps. I pulled it out, hoping that they had finally sent something supportive. Instead, there was a message from my father. "You owe us an apology." My heart has stopped. My eyes skimmed the screen again, convinced I was misinterpreted, but the words were still there, followed by 37 missed calls. 37. As if I had done something wrong and wanted to go back to them after being abandoned. I couldn't even process it. My friends' families gathered around them with flowers, hugs, and cameras. Meanwhile, I sat on the brink of a fountain, staring at my phone in shock. The text burnt itself into my mind. "What do you apologize for?" For existing outside of my sister's shadow. For daring to pursue a fraction of recognition that did not revolve around her. I wanted to toss my phone in the water, but instead I pushed it in my pocket and tightened my fists until my knuckles were white. That was the point at which the first significant breach in my relationship with my family appeared. Until then, I had put up with the favoritism, disrespectful comments, and countless explanations. But that text, that arrogance, was the first time I felt the full weight of their perverted priorities. I didn't respond. Not then. Not for the rest of the day. I walked home carrying my diploma and a basic folder. There are no balloons, flowers, or family dinners waiting. Just silence. But deep down, I knew it was merely the beginning. That message was more than simply a stab in the back. It was a declaration. And if they wanted to play this game, I was not going to sit quietly any longer. When I finally went on my phone later that night, there were so many alerts that it felt like my family had been holding a trial without me. My mother's voicemails began with the charming tone she often used when she wanted to shame me. "Patrick, honey, you must understand that this was not about you. We all had to be there for your sister. Family comes first. The following one had a harder edge. You've embarrassed us by ignoring your father's calls. Julia was crying because you didn't congratulate her. Do you really want to ruin her big day? By the third message, my father's voice thundered through the speaker. Pick up your phone and stop acting like a child. You've angered your mother, and you should apologize for your attitude. That term had been haunting me since the ceremony, and seeing it repeated in those texts made something in me twist. I sat on my bed, staring at the blank walls of my apartment, graduation case still unopened on the desk, and reflected on how every significant event in my life had been minimized in the name of family unity. When I obtained my first job at 16, they warned me not to brag because Julia was failing in school. When I was accepted to college, they felt it wasn't fair to discuss it over dinner because Julia hadn't applied anyplace. Now, the day that should have been mine alone has been completely sacrificed for her baby shower. 2 days later, I made the mistake of visiting the family home. I walked in, hoping that seeing them face to face would help them understand how much it hurt, only to see pink balloons still taped to the living room walls, confetti spilled across the carpet, and baby gifts stacked higher than the couch. Julia sat in the recliner like queen, browsing through her phone while my mother fussed over folding small onesies. Well, look who finally decided to show up, my father exclaimed upon seeing me. He did not smile. He did not congratulate me. He simply crossed his arms and gave me the look that indicated I was already in the wrong. Julia didn't look up when she said, "Did you bring something for the baby? We're still accepting gifts." She spoke as if it were a joke, but her smirk told me she meant every word. My stomach churned. I had spent what little extra money I had on a new suit for graduation because I wanted to appear well when I walked over that stage. I had nothing left for another round of baby shower gifts. I came to talk, I responded calmly, trying to keep my wrath under control. But my mother cut me off before I could explain. Patrick, this attitude of yours is unacceptable. We had to make a choice, and we chose to support your sister because she needed us more. You should have understood that. I stared at her, hoping for her to laugh and claim it was simply a misunderstanding. But she meant it. To her, it was that simple. Julia needed them. As a result, my graduation did not matter. I needed you too, I said softly, more to myself than to them. My father's eyes narrowed. Don't start with that selfish talk. You think walking across a stage compares to bringing a new life into this world. You should be grateful we even came back here to celebrate you now. Give me an award. That was the phrase he used as I looked around the room, which was still decorated for Julia's shower, with no evidence that anybody had recalled my milestone at all. No card, no balloon, no congratulations, just piles of colored wrapping paper and rattles. I recognized then that they did not think I was worth celebrating. I was only a footnote in their story about Julia. Julia finally laid her phone down and grinned at me. Don't sulk. You'll get over it. Besides, you'll probably have another graduation when you go for your master's, right? This one was just practice. Her nonchalant cruelty knocked the wind out of me. She truly believed that my years of effort, of working my way through college debt-free, were nothing more than practice. I went without saying anything else. As I walked to my car, I heard my father call after me, "You're not welcome back until you learn some respect." The door slammed, and that was that. That week I watched as Julia shared pictures from her baby shower on social media. There she stood, shining in a floral outfit, surrounded by piles of presents and happy relatives. Comments poured in from extended family. "So proud of you, Julia. You're going to be a wonderful mother." There was no mention of me or the fact that I had graduated. It was as if I had been completely wiped from the family story. I hoped an aunt or cousin would at least reach out informally, but when I saw them in person a few weeks later at a family cookout, the truth struck me more deeply than any online silence. "You know, Patrick," my uncle laughed, "you really shouldn't have skipped your sister's big day." "That was selfish," my aunt interjected. "Yes, we were all there and it was beautiful. Your absence really cast a shadow. My lack of presence." They made it sound like I had decided to boycott, as if I had purposefully neglected my sister's achievement in order to whine about my own. Nobody believed or cared whether it was the other way around. That night, as I lay awake in my apartment, I felt something inside of me harden. For years, I told myself that if I worked hard enough and achieved enough, my family would eventually notice me. But now I realized that no amount of achievement could ever top Julia's standing on the pedestal they created for her. And as much as it hurt, the knowledge came with a peculiar, frigid clarity. But I wasn't prepared to act yet. Not then. First, I needed to determine how deep their preference would go. A few months after graduation, I maintained my distance. The calls went unanswered. Texts were left as read. Family reunions are respectfully denied. I told myself I was done seeking acceptance and bending just to feel included. But blood ties have a way of drawing you back, especially when guilt pervades every word your parents ever say. By the end of the summer, I was warily approaching reconciliation. My grandma, the only person who had ever shown me unwavering support, had been wondering when I was going to visit. She still saw the best in everyone, and part of me hoped that things had calmed down sufficiently for a new beginning. That weak hope did not last long. One Saturday afternoon, I drove over to the family's residence. The front door was wide open, and laughing poured out onto the porch. Inside, the main room was packed with relatives, pale green balloons, and a big banner that read, "Welcome Baby Shower Round 2." I froze in the doorway. Round 2. Julia had not even given birth yet. Apparently one luxurious shower was insufficient. My parents had agreed to host another. And when I walked into the living room, trying not to betray my disbelief, I spotted something else. Every relative was there, including aunts, uncles, and cousins. People who had skipped my graduation without a second thought were suddenly crammed into couches, balancing paper plates of food and swooning over Julia's belly like she was a celebrity. When my grandmother saw me and rushed over, I forced a grin. "Oh, Patrick, you came. I'm so glad." She hugged me tightly, and for a brief moment, I had a sense of belonging, but it did not last. When my father saw me, his expression stiffened. "You weren't invited," he stated plainly. His voice was quiet, yet it pierced through the room like a dagger. Conversation around us was quiet. "This is for family," he explained, as if I didn't qualify. Something within me snapped at that. But before I could reply, Julia spoke up from her throne of pillows and present bags. "It's fine, Dad. Let him stay. He can make himself useful." She smiled at me. "You can help carry in the gifts from the car. They're heavy, and I'm not supposed to lift anything." The crowd erupted in laughter, some nervous, others sincere. I stood still, with heat building in my chest. Was I the source of entertainment now? Was a laborer hired to transport boxes while everyone else enjoyed the party? I wanted to go out right then, but before I could, my mother stood beside me, her hand on my shoulder. "Patrick, don't make this harder than it has to be. Your sister is carrying the next generation of this family. It's your duty to support her. Obligatory." That is the word she picked. As if Julia's pregnancy was more important than my diploma, years of work, and complete identity. I clenched my mouth and followed Julia's boyfriend Derek outside onto the driveway. He was resting against a shiny new SUV, a smug expression on his face. "Oh good, you showed up," he remarked, referring to the trunk which was stocked with baby goods such as strollers, car seats, and diaper boxes. "We could use the extra hands. I'd help, but bad back." He tapped his side as if it were an inside joke. I lifted the first box without saying anything, my silence the only defense I had against the rage seething inside. When we returned, the audience exploded with applause. Not for me, of course, but for Julia, who held up another gift while shrieking over small baby things. I positioned the box in the corner and recorded fragments of discussion. "Patrick should really be more supportive. I heard he skipped the first shower out of spite. Poor Julia, having to deal with a jealous brother." Every murmur felt like another brick wall closing in on me. They had not only abandoned me on graduation day, but they had also changed the story to make me the villain. But the breaking point did not occur until dessert. Everyone gathered around as my father tapped a glass with his spoon, signaling for attention. "Before we cut the cake," he told me, "I want to say a few words. Julia, we are so proud of you. You've brought this family together in a way nothing else ever has. You've given us purpose, something to celebrate. You're the reason we're all here today." The room was abuzz with applause. He gave me a look. "And Patrick, well, maybe one day you'll understand what it means to put family above yourself. Until then, we'll keep praying for you." It seemed as if the floor had fallen out from under me. My own father, in front of everyone, reduced me to a selfish disappointment. Gasps and murmurs permeated the room. I could feel every eye on me, waiting for my reaction. My grandmother's hand squeezed around mine. Even her presence couldn't ease the pain. I did not shout. I did not argue. I just stood there, graduation ignored and accomplishments forgotten, as my family cheered the sister who had never pulled a finger to earn anything. And at that point, something inside me changed. The placid resignation I'd maintained for years became harsher. It wasn't just favoritism anymore. This was a betrayal. I left the second baby shower without saying anything. There are no slammed doors or yelling matches, just peaceful walks out of the home and into the evening air. The sound of laughter and applause followed me down the driveway, muffled as I closed my car door, but still resonated in my mind. As I grasped the steering wheel, I realized I hadn't had a single mouthful of cake. Nevertheless, I felt sick to my stomach. My phone rang on the passenger seat. New texts were already piling up. I didn't have to look to know they were from my parents. Most likely warnings about how disrespectful I had been by leaving early, or how I had embarrassed Julia. I turned off my phone and drove home in silence. That night, I sat in my apartment with the lights turned out, staring at the diploma case on my desk. I had not hung it up. I had not even framed it. What was the point? Every time I looked at it, all I could hear was my father's voice stating Julia had given the family a purpose unlike anything else. My triumph was irrelevant to them. I kept thinking about that moment, how everyone's eyes turned toward me, not with pride, but with condemnation, as if I'd committed some horrible evil merely by being outside Julia's spotlight. Days stretched into weeks, and I began withdrawing from everything. I stopped checking family group chats, turned off social media notifications, and spent my evenings traveling aimlessly through the city to avoid sitting in the solitude of my flat. At work, I put on a pleasant grin, but on the inside, I was exhausted. Friends would ask, "So, how was graduation? Did your family come?" And I'd avoid the question, shifting the subject before the knot in my throat could reveal itself. The loneliness penetrated deeply. For so long, I assumed that if I worked hard enough, my family would eventually notice me. Now I know the truth. There was no finish line where I could earn their approval. They'd picked their story, and I didn't fit in. That realization left me hollowed out. Even grocery shopping felt weighty. Walking by young families, I watched parents carry toddlers into trolleys and giggle together. I couldn't quit wondering, why couldn't my parents give me even half of that energy? The worst thing was dealing with my granny. She called me frequently, her voice soothing, and always tried to bridge the distance. "Patrick, your parents don't mean to hurt you," she stated once, but her tone indicated uncertainty. "They're just caught up right now. Julia needs them." She wanted to think the best, but she couldn't disguise her hesitation in her voice anymore. I liked her too much to tell her the whole truth. So I'd simply tell her I was busy or that I needed time. Then I'd sit in the silence of my apartment, caught between missing her warmth and resenting the family she protected. One night, I received a voicemail from my father that went deeper than any of the others. His voice was steady and almost rehearsed. "Patrick, your actions have been unacceptable. We've talked about it, and we can't accept you back until you apologize to your sister and the family. You're isolating yourself, and that's on you. We'll pray you come to your senses." There it was again. Apologize. As if the crime were mine. As if I had abandoned them. I recall sitting on my bed, clutching my phone, my hands shaking. That single word had become a leash, which they wanted me to put around my own neck. But somewhere in the cloud of sorrow, a new concept began to emerge. If I was already the villain in their story, perhaps I didn't need to continue playing the role they had assigned me. Maybe I didn't have to spend my entire life trying to win them over. I wasn't prepared to act yet. I did not have the strength. But late at night, when the flat was silent, I began making mental preparations. Not great plots of vengeance just yet, but modest steps toward reclaiming pieces of myself that had been chipped away over the years. Framing my diploma. Saving money for a place larger than this cramped apartment. Finding people who viewed me for who I was. Not as my sister's shadow. It was a tentative resolution. But it was a start. And while I hadn't decided what form it would take, I knew this. If my family expected me to play the role of the forgotten son, they were in for a surprise, because I wasn't going to be forgotten forever. The transition did not occur overnight. At first it was modest and nearly imperceptible, like planting seeds in soil I wasn't sure would grow. I started with my diploma. On Saturday morning, I took it to a frame shop. The woman behind the desk assisted me in selecting a simple black frame with a matte finish. When I hung it above my desk, it made the flat feel less empty. That piece of paper served as more than simply a reminder of my family's absence. It was testimony of my perseverance and grit. Every late-night shift, every article I'd written at 3 a.m., every sacrifice I'd made. It was all there, staring at me. And it was mine. Work was the next turning point. I'd only been in my entry-level job for a few months, primarily doing menial work and keeping my head down. But once I stopped focusing my efforts on pleasing my family, I found myself leaning into my work. I volunteered for projects that no one else desired. I stayed late, not because I had to, but because I wanted to learn the specifics. My boss noticed. One afternoon she approached me and said, "Patrick, I see how hard you're working. How would you feel about leading the next project proposal?" My heart raced. It was not glamorous. It involved spreadsheets and research, but it gave me the opportunity to show myself on my own terms. I poured myself into the project. While my family was busy organizing gender reveal parties and newborn photo shoots, I was staying late at work, studying presentation techniques on YouTube, and perfecting my pitch until I could repeat it in my sleep. When it came time to speak, I stood in front of a panel of executives, palms sweating but voice firm. I put out every detail with confidence that I didn't realize I had. After I finished, the room became silent for a moment before the department head stated, "That's the most thorough proposal we've seen from a junior associate in years." My supervisor smiled, and for the first time in a long time I felt seen, truly witnessed. The acknowledgement came with a tiny increase, which helped to alleviate the persistent tension that had been building up in my chest for years. With that money, I improved my residence. Nothing fancy, just a one-bedroom with more light and a kitchen that did not feel like a closet. I painted the walls myself, stocked the shelves with literature I'd always wanted to read, and purchased a good coffee maker. Slowly, the room began to reflect me, rather than serve as a reminder of my shortcomings. However, the most significant transformation occurred on a societal level. I had always been guarded, unwilling to let people in after years of being kicked out at home. However, as my confidence grew at work, I found myself opening up more. I began saying yes to after-work drinks, attending trivia nights with colleagues, and even allowing a few friendships to develop into something more. Alex, a co-worker, became a good buddy. He was the first person I ever recounted the entire tale to: the missed graduation, the baby shower, and the text from my father. I expected him to look at me as if I was exaggerating, but instead he shook his head and said, "Man, that's brutal. No wonder you've been carrying that weight. But listen, your worth isn't tied to them. You're building something real, and they can't take it away." These words stayed with me. For years I had waited for my family to validate me. But someone outside of that circle reminded me that I did not need their approval to exist. And the more I focused on my own improvement, the clearer it became. I wasn't powerless anymore. I became more aware of the discrepancy when I occasionally checked in on family via social media. Julia's baby showers, nursery, and posts on the miracle of parenthood were all over social media. Cracks appeared behind the slick coating. Derek, her boyfriend, appeared less present with each passing month. Rumors arose among extended family members about financial problems and confrontations behind closed doors. Meanwhile, my life was steadily improving. I wasn't wealthy. I was not famous. But I had steadiness. And I'd earned it. The true turning point occurred one evening, when my employer summoned me back to her office. "Patrick," she added, "I want you to consider applying for the management training program. It's competitive, but I think you'd be a strong candidate." My chest constricted with surprise. Just a year ago, I was the youngster sitting alone at graduation, staring at a text demanding an apology. Someone has now recognized my leadership potential. Someone thought I could get into a position of authority. That night, I poured myself a cup of coffee, sat down at my desk beneath the framed diploma, and looked over the application form. For the first time, I wasn't concerned about whether my parents would approve, or if Julia would overshadow me. I was reflecting on what I desired and how far I had come. The power I had previously craved for in my family's eyes was beginning to manifest in mine. Even still, the past remained. Their words lingered, harsh and weighty. Even though I was constructing a life without them, I knew this story was far from over. Because the relatives that had abandoned me will eventually come knocking again. And when they did, they discovered someone completely different from the boy they had rejected. It was almost uncanny how the tides began to change. For the first time in my life, I wasn't looking for bits of approval. I was being sought out. My name began to circulate in higher-level groups at work. Not only for the management program, but also for my natural ability to organize chaos. When a project fell apart, I became the go-to person, the calm hand that everyone relied on as deadlines approached. That reputation carried weight, and with it, influence. When I was officially admitted into the management training program, it was like entering a completely new world: leadership seminars, executive mentorship, and strategy sessions. Doors that had previously felt bolted shut now swung open. Valerie, a sharp but fair-minded CEO, was particularly interested in me. She approached me after a presentation one day and said, Patrick, you have something people can't fake. Resilience. Don't waste it. Learn how to use it. Her words became a mantra. I pushed myself into learning not only how to manage people, but also how to handle politics, read the room, and think long-term. And slowly, I began to recognize how those same skills could be used outside of work, because my family has not vanished. They were still present in the background, living their filtered version of reality online. Julia had her baby, a boy called Noah, and the family celebrated as if it were the second coming. My newsfeed were swamped with photos of my parents beaming as grandparents, Julia draped in pastel blankets with her miraculous child, and messages about how family is everything. Family is everything. I nearly laughed when I first saw it. They had entirely rewritten the narrative, such that anyone looking in from the outside would believe we were the epitome of harmony. However, reality tends to leak through crevices. My cousin, with whom I was still on excellent terms, approached me over coffee one afternoon. Patrick, I don't know if you know this, she said, leaning over the dinner table, but your parents have been asking around about you. They say you're distant, that you've lost your way. They're trying to make it sound like you're the problem. My jaw constricted. Of course they were. They couldn't confess they'd abandoned me, so they made up a new scenario in which I abandoned them. That same cousin also casually mentioned something else. Julia and Derek are having money problems. He's not working steadily, and the baby expenses are piling up. Your parents are stressed. They've been covering more than they expected. I sat back in my chair, my coffee tasted harsher. Money issues. Dependence. Cracks in the gold pedestal. For years I had been the one scraping by, the one they dismissed as a burden while they lavished resources on Julia's every need. With their chosen star under strain, the roles began to alter. And unlike them, I had constructed something solid brick by brick without their assistance. Around the same time, my employer offered me the opportunity to manage a high-profile account. It wasn't simply a promotion, it came with a sizable raise and, more crucially, visibility. If I pulled it off, I'd establish my reputation not only in my department, but throughout the organization. I worked harder than ever before, putting every ounce of pain and rejection into laser focus. When the project was successful and brought in record numbers, I was offered a permanent management job. My pay has doubled. My name began appearing in company newsletters. For the first time, I was not just surviving, but thriving. I moved into a modern new apartment with floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the downtown skyline. I bought an automobile that would start on the first try every morning. When I walked into meetings, people listened. I was no longer invisible. That's when my mother's first text arrived. Patrick, love, it has been too long. We'd love for you to stop over and see Noah. He's growing so quickly, sweetie. The same mother who told me I needed to apologize was now using her grandchild as bait. A week later, my father called. I didn't respond, but the message had that calm, controlling tone that I was too familiar with. Patrick, it is time to let go of the past. Your family needs you. Noah needs his uncle. These words stayed with me. Your family needs you. For years I needed them. Yet they turned me down. The roles had suddenly reversed. And as much as it ached, it also ignited a fire within me because, for the first time in my life, I wasn't on the losing end. I was in a position of strength. They needed me. And that realization, that wonderful, dangerous realization, is when the concept of payback began to emerge. I didn't respond to their texts right away. In reality, I let weeks pass. Every day I kept my phone on mute. I ignored every text message and deleted every voicemail without listening. It was not about being petty. It was all about timing. They weren't in control for the first time, and I wanted them to feel it slowly and fully. Then one afternoon, I saw my cousin again. She smirked when she spotted me. You know, Julia's been asking about you a lot. Apparently she and Derek are in a bad spot financially. Your parents are covering their rent now, and with the baby, they're drowning. She paused, dropping her voice. They keep saying, if only Patrick would step up. Step up. That phrase stuck with me. For years I had been ignored, ridiculed and mocked. Now that their golden girl was struggling, I was supposed to take responsibility. Not this time. That weekend, I dressed sharply. A sleek blue suit, polished shoes, the kind of style that made people sit up straight in their chairs when you went into a room. I drove my new automobile, which shined in the light, to my parents' house. I hadn't been back since the second baby shower, and when I drew up to the side of the same driveway where I'd earlier been assigned to haul boxes, I was blasted with a flashback. I rang the doorbell, and my mother's face lighted up. Patrick, "Oh, sweetheart, you came." She drew me into an embrace, but it felt overdone, too sweet, as if she had practiced it in the mirror. My father was in the living room with Noah in his arms, and Julia sitting on the couch. The baby gurgled cheerfully, the sole innocent in the room. "Look at you," my father exclaimed, admiring the outfit and the watch on my wrist. His voice was full of the pride and disdain I had grown up with. "Doing well, huh?" "Better than well," I said evenly, taking my seat. I paused for a bit before continuing. "I heard you've been having difficulties." Julia's jaw tightened at hearing the word. "If you're here to rub it in, don't bother." My mother rushed to smooth things over. "What your sister means is things have been difficult. Derek's hours were cut, and the baby's expenses are overwhelming. We thought maybe as family, you could help." There it was. The request. They hadn't even attempted to conceal it. I leaned back, folded my hands, and looked each one in the eyes. "You want my help?" I inquired slowly. "The same family who skipped my graduation. The same family who told me I owed them an apology while I sat alone on the biggest day of my life. The same family who made me feel like I wasn't welcome in my own home." The room went silent. Julia's cheeks reddened, and my father's gaze narrowed. "That was the past," he stated firmly. "We need to move forward. Family is about sacrifice." "Funny," I replied with a slight smile. "Because I sacrificed for years, and all I ever got was silence. Now you want my support? Why? Because the golden child isn't shining so brightly anymore?" My mom let out a gasp. Julia shot to her feet. "How dare you?" she demanded. "You don't know what it's like to raise a child." "You're right," I responded, rising up. "But I do know what it's like to walk across a stage alone, because my family decided a baby shower was more important than my future. I know what it's like to be erased from every conversation because my sister needed all the attention, and I know what it's like to build a life from nothing, without a dime or an ounce of encouragement from any of you." Their expressions shifted: anger, embarrassment, and astonishment. I allowed the weight of my words sink in before administering the final blow. "You made your choice that day. You chose who mattered, and now I'm making mine." I slid a card on the coffee table. Not a check, not cash. Just my business card, sleek and simple, with my new title imprinted on it. "If you ever want to treat me like family again, start by acknowledging who I am now. Not the forgotten son, not the backup plan, but the person who stood on his own when you all turned away." Then I walked out. I did not yell. I did not bang the door. I just left in the same way I did years ago. However, this time I was not broken. I was in control. The following day, I checked my phone. Dozens of missed calls. Messages ranged from appealing to enraged. One from my mother stated, "Patrick, please. Your sister is in tears. We did not intend to hurt you. Can't you help us just once?" Another from my father remarked, "You're being selfish again. Family is about sharing and not harboring grudges." But I didn't respond. For the first time, their plight didn't feel like a burden I had to bear. It seemed like justice. The weeks after my visit to their house were among the oddest of my life. For years, I was the one pursuing scraps of attention. The person calling, apologizing, and pleading to be seen. My phone would not stop buzzing. My parents fluctuated between guilt and wrath. My mother's communications were filled with heartbreaking pleas. "Patrick, we just want to start over. Noah needs his uncle." Meanwhile, my father issued strong commands. "Enough games. Stand up for your family." Julia, on the other hand, was pure poison. One text read, "You think you're better than me now? Don't forget who sacrificed everything so you could live a regular life." I stared at that one for a long time, wondering what universe she was living in, because I couldn't recall her giving up anything for me. I disregarded them all. Not out of spite anymore, but because I knew I owed them nothing. Every call I declined, every message I left unanswered, was a silent statement. I was no longer theirs to control. Even I was surprised by how badly the fallout hit. My cousin contacted me one night, her voice full of secondhand drama. "Your parents are furious," she stated. "They informed everyone that you declined to aid, and now people are asking questions." Aunt Ruth just replied, "Well, maybe if you treated Patrick better, he'd want to help." She chuckled. "It's unraveling. Everyone is seeing it now." Then came the shocker. Derek, my sister's boyfriend, has packed everything and departed. There's no warning, not a long goodbye, just left. Word quickly spread. He'd been drowning under the pressure, resentful of the expectations. And one day, He just walked out, leaving Julia with a newborn and a stack of unpaid bills. My parents attempted to keep it secret at first, but something like that can only be hidden for so long. The whispers quickly transformed into pitying stares during church, and the pedestal Julia had been set on wobbled until it toppled to the floor. That was when the desperation peaked. My father showed up at my office. He didn't get past the lobby. Security called to let me know that a man was downstairs and insisted on speaking with me. I instructed them to send him away. Later, I discovered that he had stood there for nearly an hour, red-faced and pacing before storming away. That night, he left me a message that began with wrath and finished with a cracking voice. "Patrick, we only need your aid." But I didn't give in. Help wasn't what they wanted. They desired control. The old dynamic in which I was the neglected son, constantly grasping while they tugged the strings. And that individual ceased to exist. Months passed, and my life only grew steadier. I was promoted again, and my projects gained recognition beyond the organization. I traveled for the first time, standing in airports with a passport in hand, liberated in ways I never imagined possible. I filled my flat with laughter from friends who truly came out for me and praised my victories without envy. Every step forward seemed like retrieving another aspect of the boy they had worked so hard to forget. Meanwhile, the family that once mocked my hardships began to crumble. Julia moved back home with my parents, her independence gone, her idyllic life reduced to strained silence and financial distress. My parents, who used to brag about their united family, suddenly faced unpleasant inquiries about why their son seldom came over, why their daughter appeared so bitter, and why their lives looked so different from the rosy picture they'd painted. The final nail was my grandmother's birthday. She was the only one I consented to see, so I reserved a small private dining room at a restaurant she enjoyed. When I came, she grabbed me tightly, tears in her eyes, and whispered, "I'm so proud of you." That was enough for me. But as the evening progressed, I noticed my parents and Julia enter the restaurant. They had not been invited. They must have discovered out from someone else. They noticed me across the room, myself in a fitted suit, friends and co-workers at my side, and my grandma beaming with pride at the celebration I'd thrown. They attempted to approach, but the maitre d' stopped them at the door, telling them that it was a private occasion. My mother called out, her voice trembling, "Patrick, please let us in. We're family." The room became quiet. Everyone looked at me. I stood and proceeded to the doorway, looking at them one last time. Their expressions were desperate, begging, and devoid of the arrogance they had once worn so proudly. "Family," I replied gently. "Family doesn't abandon you when you need them most. Family doesn't erase you. You made your choice, and now I've made mine." I returned to the dining room, and the maitre d' closed the door behind me. My grandmother grabbed for my hand, her grin unwavering. The restaurant's noise vanished, leaving behind the warmth of people who actually cared. In that instant, I recognized the truth. I hadn't lost a family, I'd built one. And the old ones, the ones who demanded apologies and grinned as I stood alone, were left outside, banging on a door that would not open.